Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Area 1 Young Rider podcast. I'm so excited to talk with today's guest on just a really important topic today. I hope all of you listening, whether you're at home, doing barn chores, driving, really whatever, finish the episode feeling more educated and prepared on the topic of safety in our sport of eventing. So, whenever you're able to, would you just introduce yourself to the listeners, let them know who you are, and why you are here to talk about equestrian safety today?
I'm Bevin Dugan, and I'm on the Area 1 Council as the professional liaison. So basically, I'm kind of the person on the council who tries to make sure that the professionals are heard in decisions that are made and vice versa, that things are getting to the professionals, and basically I try to force people to be involved. And it's been a topic of conversation. I mean, always in eventing, safety is a thing, but I think safety has just become more and more and more of a topic for us, especially, we just had a couple of incidents in Area 1 this summer that have made people be more and more aware. So that's why we're talking more and more about it.
Yeah, awesome. So, question, how long have you been liaison for Area 1?
I think it's 2 or 3 years. And it's kind of a new role. Maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago that I just kind of asked around about how I could get more involved in things, because I just wanted to do more and be involved and try to help. And I was advised to talk to the council, and then the role of the pro liaison just kind of came out of that.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. That's actually really cool to hear.
Yeah.
So, before we jump into our actual topic, for those of you who have listened to our past 2 episodes, you might have noticed that I like to start off the episode just asking a couple fun, lighthearted questions. So, Bevin, I'm going to ask a couple right now. Personally, I've actually asked this all 3 now episodes. What are 3 things that you just could not live without at a competition?
Oh, God. Let me think. I always bring a really good raincoat, because if you do that, it doesn't rain. So I guess that. Gosh, I don't know. It sounds so stupid. Always have to bring my stud kit, right? Because we always use that. And I'm trying to think if I have anything fun and exciting and different that I do, but I think I'm pretty boring. I think, raincoat, studs, and my cross-country bat. That's my favorite cross-country bat. There you go.
I mean, those are solid answers. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is your favorite out of the 3? Dressage, stadium, or cross-country?
I always think it's funny when that question gets asked, because I think if it's not cross-country, why would we be eventing? I do a lot of dressage, actually, separate from my eventing. I have an upper-level dressage horse, and I do like it a lot. But I just feel like if you don't think cross-country is the best, then why would you event? So, for sure, it's the cross-country.
I actually have a friend who she used to event, and she said how she knew eventing was not for her was that dressage was her favorite. So
yeah, there you go.
That's a solid way to tell.
Then go do the dressage.
What is your favorite horse treat to give to your horses?
We feed a lot of Mrs. Pastures in my barn. Yeah, the horses love them.
And then, lastly, you did kind of mention a lucky bat, but do you have a lucky item that you always, not a lucky one, but a lucky item that you always compete with, or just any sort of thing to get yourself ready and hyped up for cross-country?
No. The only thing, I'm a little weird about having anything that's completely brand new, but no, I used to sort of try to have a lucky thing because I thought that was cool, but I'm just not organized enough, so I don't have a thing.
And then I'm always curious, how did you get into eventing?
I grew up, when I started riding, I rode at King Oak, and so I just kind of ended up in it because that was the barn I was at, and I was pretty much immediately a barn rat. So like, I took a couple lessons and then pretty much never left the farm and just got exposed to it right away, helping at the events and, running dressage scores and being a fence judge and all of that before I could compete. And it just that's just what I ended up doing. And thank God, because I think if I had, grown up near a Pasofino farm or something, I might be doing Pasofinos, or I probably would have quit if I had been doing Pasofinos. So
yeah,
the eventing, it was just kind of an organic thing because of where I happened to grow up.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get back to safety. So, you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your role as liaison involves communicating with the other pros in the area, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much it. Like, very little of it is just about me. It's more about me I'll bring up a topic and say, hey, what do we think about this, you guys? What do we need to do? Blah, blah, blah. And then I try to sort of pool what everybody has to say and bring it to the council and see where we go from there.
Yeah, okay. So, this is kind of general, but what have some of those things you've addressed been recent? You've said it's been 3 years that you've been liaison. So in those past 3 years, what have been some of those concerns and topics that you've had to address?
I think things that have been discussed a lot, and honestly, there's a lot of conversation. I wouldn't say there isn't action, but things take time. And it's really kind of just been this year that I feel like we're actually making true progress. But one thing that's always been a big topic has been the fact that in Area 1, we're losing events. There are fewer events than there used to be. And it's not even so much the losing of the events as like losing some of the bigger venues, losing the bigger property. So what does that mean for the future of eventing here, given that, really eventing started here in this country. So that's a big concern. And then kind of with that is the fact that because there isn't so much land anymore, there aren't as many kids really who grow up riding and with horses in their backyard and, being the kind of rough and tumble horse kids. And honestly, that is one thing that could lead to some of the safety concerns. But, really it's kind of just how eventing has changed in Area 1 and what we can do about it. There's certainly the fact that land in New England is so expensive and hard to come by, right? Big pieces of land can be hard to come by. So like, what does that mean for us and what can we do and how can we support the events that are still in existence or the new ones that are trying to develop so that the sport keeps going? I think, that's really kind of been the biggest topic of conversation all around.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just curious because this is the Area 1 Young Rider podcast. What do you think those dedicated Area 1 Young Rider eventers, this new generation of eventers can do to help preserve eventing and keep it going in this area?
It's a good question because I think it's a challenge for young riders. Like, even when I was growing up, like I said, I was at King Oak and, we went riding bareback and we went down to the river and there was a lot of just like palling around stuff that I think a lot of kids just aren't able to be exposed to. So, I think the more young riders can diversify their experience and, not just go take their lesson and focus on making a perfect 20-meter circle, but just the more the young riders can be full all-around horse people and, get experience managing horses, not just showing up for their lesson and riding horses. All of that is what's going to keep this thing really going, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about both horse and rider equipment. So I don't know if you saw this, but not that long ago, Virginia Tech did a study on helmets and kind of rated the quality of them in terms of, just safety and, which one will protect the rider more in the event of a fall. If you did see this study, do you agree with how they rated them? And would you recommend going and getting a higher rated helmet rather than their lower ones?
I mean, I am aware of the study, and certainly I'm not an expert, so I can't speak to, all of their testing standards, etc. But absolutely, everybody should be wearing the most safe helmet they can get their hands on, especially going cross country. And it's really fascinating. The more I have learned about helmets and helmet technology, how low the standard for equestrian helmets really is. So that, from what I understand, even the safest helmets aren't nearly as safe as like motocross helmets.
Yeah.
Actually, I shouldn't say that. I think there are a couple of brands of helmets that are getting there. Yeah. But I mean, nothing frustrates me more is going to an event and seeing somebody in a helmet that's clearly 10 years old, or with the chin strap not fitting properly, or whatever. And I think certainly USEA has rules, and there's all of what happens on that side. But just as riders, it's up to everybody to, number one, value your own head, right? And try to protect yourself. But for everybody, in picking the best helmet you can pick to keep yourself the most safe you can be, you're actually helping the entire sport, because the fewer bad accidents there are, the better for everybody who wants to do this.
Yeah, 100%. I see people online talking about, helmets they want. It's always just based off looks and how pretty the helmet is, and not how good quality it is, and that's always bothered me. So yeah, I really agree with what you're saying there. Another piece of rider equipment is vests. Just because we have a lot of young riders in here, could you explain the importance of wearing a vest while cross country or jumping, and if you have any brands that you recommend?
Again, I'm not an expert. What I can say is about vests, what I can say is, again, there's so much available on the market now, right, to keep us safe. When I was growing up, I think toward the very beginning of my eventing career, it might have still been a choice whether or not you wore a cross-country vest. If not, it had just become a thing that you had to. And it's the same, that there are different ratings for vests. I think there's some controversy about whether the air vest, really makes a difference or not. Again, that's not my area of expertise, but I do think for sure that it's up to everybody to be aware of what is the most safe, and basically to do whatever they can to have the equipment that's the most safe. Personally, I have a Charles Owen vest that has a really high rating, and I have a Hit Air vest that I wear over that. And I'm going to find something to knock on that it has kept me very safe. And I think again, when I go to an event and I see somebody wearing a cross-country vest that's not really fitting properly, looks really, really old and beat up and all of that, I think, oh, okay, come on, you gotta want to do better than that. For me, another personal pet peeve is when people, especially professionals, post videos cross-country schooling without their proper safety equipment. Yeah. Sure, do I sometimes pop over a little log or a beginner novice-sized coop in my backyard when I'm not wearing my vest? Yes. If I'm just sort of doing it as I'm passing by. But it drives me crazy when top level professionals post themselves jumping proper jumps, preliminary and above things without a vest. I just think it's such a bad example for everybody.
Yeah, I've seen that too. That bothers me. That is a really good point, though. Before we move on from the safety, I do suggest riders taking a look at the Virginia Tech helmet ratings. I think that is actually a very interesting read. So yeah, to move on, what are some ways that you think riders can better prepare themselves for a safe ride when they're, walking their course, whether it be stadium or cross country?
I think in terms of course walking, basic things like really knowing your course. In the show jumping, I think it's more straightforward, right? The course is there, it's posted, it's generally on a fairly flat piece of land. Like, it's a little more straightforward. I think cross country obviously gets a little bit more complicated, but for one thing, either having a coach that's there to bounce ideas off of, to give you advice. If you don't have a coach there, knowing that, especially here in Area 1, we have such great people who are so happy to help, that just knowing you can go and ask someone. If you are concerned about a fence or don't know what kind of studs to use that day or whatever, just knowing that for every rider, if we all have questions. I all the time when I go to an event will just, ask around about what studs people are using, or I might say, hey, what do you think about fence 6? Everybody's happy to help. So that's a big thing. But certainly just the more riders are aware of terrain and having an understanding about how terrain plays into the equation, how the shape of the front face of a fence plays into the equation, how the landing side affects things. Is it slippery? Is it muddy? Is the ground hard? It's really education, right? It's not just about the day of the course walk. I think it's kind of knowing the things that you need to be aware of, knowing that you can ask questions, and just trying to be as thorough as possible is always going to make things safer.
Yeah, 100%. Especially on the asking questions. There are people there whose whole point of being there that day is to make sure your questions are addressed, and if there is a legitimate concern, make sure that a change is made. So, yeah, never hesitate to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So, I did want to ask about horse safety equipment, and if you've noticed any specific items of tack really helping equine safety that maybe people don't always take into consideration?
Well, I think one thing is whatever the tack is, that it needs to fit.
Yeah.
Loose girths, not safe. A breastplate that's, you could drive a truck through between the part that goes between the horse's front legs and the horse's body, not safe.
Yeah.
So an awareness of having tack that fits is huge. And that keeps riders and horses safe, because obviously if your horse puts a leg through its breastplate, everybody's going to have a bad day.
Yeah.
And as far as keeping horses safe, personally, I never jump cross country without boots on all 4 legs.
Yeah.
I just feel like if we're asking them to jump solid things that don't move, it's up to us to protect them, because we make mistakes. And so if I make a mistake and cause my horse to hit something, I think that they should be protected. Some of that is a personal opinion, but the other thing, and something that I know I have observed when I'm just out and about at events, walking around, there are some people who have beautiful tack that just doesn't fit, or that isn't functioning as it should. So certainly martingales and bits, for example, if they're not functioning in the way they're intended to, that can always lead to a safety issue, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really good to take into account. And just out of curiosity, in your time as a liaison, have you seen any equipment being used that, might be common or uncommon that just isn't safe and people should probably stop using?
Gosh, off the top of my head, there's nothing that totally springs to mind. I mean, I think there are things that personally I would not put on horses just because it goes against some of my own opinions on training, but not necessarily for safety. I mean, I really think just that things need to fit.
Yeah.
Bell boots need to fit. If bell boots are giant and your horse overreaches and steps on the bell boot that's on the ground, things can happen with poor fit. And I guess to me that would be the biggest one. It's not so much a certain, a type of bit or a type of bridle or a type of martingale. It's more that whatever's on there, if it fits, it should be safe, more or less.
Yeah, definitely. So another thing that I've kind of noticed people having this mindset is, and I think you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, is that safety is really mainly taken into account when people are competing. I don't see as many people taking the real safety steps while they're just riding at home. They feel more comfortable there. I'm wondering if you have any comments on this and why that is not a very good mindset to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to remember that horses are big, powerful animals. And so it does not matter if we're at an event or we are at home, the horse is a big, powerful animal. So always respecting that. And it's both, when you're riding and on the ground, right? Because there's things we'll see, again, at an event, the way a horse is tied to the trailer, for example, and you sort of cringe and think, oh God, I hope nothing bad happens there.
Yeah.
And the same at home, like we're all guilty of sort of saying, oh, I'll just quick, throw the lead rope over here and the horse will stand and everything will be fine. And 2 seconds later, the horse is like running around the barnyard. So again, going back just to horsemanship, remembering that these are prey animals with a fight or flight instinct, and it does not matter if we're at an event or at home, their hind legs are strong and powerful. And, when you're riding, certainly you don't see, well, I shouldn't even say that. You see plenty of people on their phones at competitions walking around, but I'm sure it's worse at home.
Yeah.
And just paying attention is so important. And like you said, that people get kind of casual at home, and all it takes is, 1 second of something going wrong for there to be something really bad that happens. And I think we all have moments that we get reminded that we sort of go, whoa, that was close. And then you pay more attention the next time. But there's always the instance where it's not, ooh, that was close. It's like, oh, it happened and I just got kicked, or I just got bucked off, or whatever. And horses are horses, whether we're at home or away from home.
Yeah, that's really so important to think about, and I'm glad that you were able to talk about that a little bit. So, I have a feeling, as a liaison, you've probably had to talk about these, but could you possibly talk about frangible fences? I hope I said that right. And just what they are, explain that to people who might not know what they are, and, why we have them, because I've actually been seeing a lot more of them in my time eventing, and I think that it's great, and I'm just curious if you have seen a positive impact on safety here and all around because of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's still relatively new technology. I don't remember the exact year that the frangibles started coming into play. They aren't really appropriate below training level. I don't, off the top of my head, know all of the exact specs and dimensions, but at a certain height, they don't work. The fences have to be up to a certain height for the frangible to work, to be able to engage, to have the safety. And again, don't quote me too hard on that because I don't know all the details. But for sure, if you hit a frangible hard enough, it will fall down. And that might mean that your horse does not fall down. Yeah. And that's huge. And there's always, I shouldn't say always, but we know of instances where, like at the Olympics in Tokyo, there was a frangible that went really easily. I think Michael Young lost the gold medal over it. And there will be some people who say, that's not fair, they barely touched it, it shouldn't be there, etc. I'm sure there'll be a day that I'm one of those people when I have a pin that I don't think I deserved. But you think about the flip side of that. Like, yeah, but what if it's the thing that prevented a rotational fall? Yeah. And even I think Boyd at Poe this fall, he had a pin.
He did, yeah.
And he was really good about saying, like, yeah, I had the pin. I didn't jump the fence perfectly. Maybe it's a really good thing that technology was there.
Yeah.
And maybe it was my unlucky day that if it hadn't been frangible, it would have stayed up and he would have, I think he might have even won if that hadn't happened. But there are more and more of them around. USCA has, I think, had a grant system to help events build more frangibles. So you'll see more and more tables that are frangible. And I mean, at almost every event now, I think, that has an open oxer, at training level or above, you'll see the frangible technology on them at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's great to hear that they're trying to expand that. And I'm taking a guess, this is a Young Rider podcast. The young riders that are listening are probably on social media. And personally, if they're anything like me, have seen a lot of videos of frangibles going into effect, and it is definitely always, if they had hit it any differently, it might have just seemed like an unlucky day, but if they'd hit it any differently, then what could have happened? So, yeah.
Yeah, and it takes, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the amount of force it takes to knock a show jump down is way, 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 way less than what it takes to have set off a frangible table, or if you have a rail on a corner or an oxer or something. So yeah, you have to hit the jump really hard. And I think too, there's the different types of pins, like there's the yellow pin and the red pin. And those are better questions for a course designer to really explain the differences. But again, I know for me, I would rather have 11 penalties and lose my blue ribbon than break my neck or break my horse's neck, or both,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I'm curious if you agree, because you're the liaison, but I feel like when people hear, if I'm to say safety and eventing, their mind is going to immediately jump to stadium and cross country, more cross country. But though arguably it's safer, I think that dressage should still be taken into account when we're thinking of safety. And in your time as liaison, have you ever had to address anything dressage related, or do you have any opinions on that?
No, I don't think anything has come up about the dressage phase specifically. I think one thing that comes up is the warm-up, and that's in all three phases, but certainly plenty of events will have, say, 3 dressage rings that all share the same warm-up, and it's not always the biggest space. So I'd say that's one place that if people aren't prepared to be at an event because maybe they aren't able to deal with their horse that's having a bad day and struggling to be around all the other horses, we've all seen it, that can for sure present a safety issue. People being able to deal with their horses that might be, fresh on a cold morning, or worried because they're riding around with 20 other horses in the warm up. That's a thing. And just people looking up, paying attention to where they're going, avoiding head-on collisions. I'd say that's probably the only real discussion about safety in the dressage that I've encountered so far.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, yeah, I think everybody has had some sort of encounter in the warm-up arena that wasn't necessarily the safest. So, yeah, I think encouraging warm-up etiquette and, if you're a trainer, teaching that to your students is so important. You might not necessarily know that it's a safety thing, but it really is. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Jumping off of the idea that things just aren't as addressed as much, I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're the pro liaison, so you deal with more the professional eventers in the area, right?
Yep. But having said that, the professionals are the coaches of the adult amateurs and the young riders.
Yes.
So plenty of other topics come up in our conversations. It's not just related to how the professionals are affected in their competing. It's how we're helping our students, issues we see when we're at an event coaching, at an event riding a young horse, whatever it is. So I feel like even though it's the professional liaison is the title, it ends up encompassing kind of everybody in a way. Because at least theoretically, the professionals are interacting with the adult amateurs and the young riders as well.
Yeah. Obviously, lower level eventing isn't as intense. It is definitely safer, lower jumps, simpler courses, but I think because of what you just said, you'd agree, but it is important to address safety with those younger riders in those young levels, right?
Oh, of course. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's less intense because, what's a big deal for me? I might not think beginner novice is a big deal, but for somebody who's never done beginner novice, it's a really big deal and it is really intense. So I think there needs to be a respect at all the levels, and safety is for sure an issue at all the levels. We all warm up amongst other horses at every level. We all jump solid cross-country jumps at every level. We all deal with terrain at every level. So, of course, when you really boil it down, it is advanced, quote unquote, more dangerous than starter, I suppose. But, I've been the most nervous I've ever been on a 4-year-old at their first beginner novice.
Yeah.
Being in the start box at a 3-star is no way scarier than that. So it matters at every level for sure.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, and I'm glad that you addressed that. When I competed in my first novice, I think that was the most terrified I have ever been. So yeah. It is definitely, everybody kind of having a different idea of that is really important to take into consideration.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what do you think that Area 1 is doing better in terms of safety in eventing?
Well, I think for one thing, we have such amazing people in Area 1. I compete all on the East Coast. I haven't been out West. But I just feel like the camaraderie among not just professionals, everybody is exceptional. And the quality of the coaching and instruction is exceptional. So I think that taking all of these great people and just talking more about it and, bringing these topics to the surface and discussing them and brainstorming about what we can do is doing better. I think it's going to lead to good things. And talking to organizers about concerns we may have about, for example, maybe the warm-up area at a certain event we have some concerns about, and so we can go to the organizers and ask, is there any way we could make that area bigger? things like that. Just the more conversation we have, I think the safer things can be. And I don't know what it's like in every other area, but I do know that the effort of people to work together, the willingness of everybody to put our heads together and talk about things we disagree about instead of just getting mad at one another, all of that. That's really where the safety thing is going to come from. That's where it's all going to stem from.
Yeah, totally. So, I was curious. I kind of wanted to see what parents were concerned about for their own children who are eventing. So, obviously, my mother is the mom of an eventer, so I asked her if she had any questions. So I'm just kind of curious what your opinion is on this question that she asked me, which is, what do you suggest we as parents can do to ensure our kids' safety? What are things that we should be looking for if we are newcomers to the horse world?
That is so good that she's asking that. I've joked with younger riders that I teach. I'll kind of say, your parents have no idea how much control I have over you. Ha ha ha. Because really, the instructor, like parents who aren't horse people, have no idea. They don't really understand how to assess whether what their child is being taught is appropriate or not. Is it too much? Is it too intense? Is it safe? Is it not safe enough? So I think that's tough as a parent. And one thing, good instruction, right? So being able to evaluate the quality of the instruction and the coaching that young riders are getting. Certainly the ECP, the Eventing Coaches Program, it's a fabulous program for educating coaches. And so people who have been involved in the program, whether they're certified or are working on being certified, that's one good way of evaluating the level or the quality of the instruction. Having said that, I know some exceptional instructors in Area 1 who are not certified for various reasons. Yeah. So that's not the only way, but by all means, asking questions. So if it's a non-horsey parent, ask around, kind of poll everybody about who are the trainers who seem to have riders who are successful. And by successful, I don't necessarily mean winning. I mean, having longevity in the sport, having a good safety record, etc. I really think that's the biggest thing, because we all need to learn. And so for a young rider, the example that is being set for you by your trainer is probably going to be the biggest influence on the safety of that young rider. And I guess the other thing that I would think about is, it seems like, I feel old saying this, but kids these days are doing so many things. And so, especially for eventing, it takes a lot to practice all three phases and to be good at all three phases and to be safe and to be fit and to have the relationship with your horse. So that takes time. And I think for a young rider that's, trying to keep their grades up, trying to play soccer, trying to be, in French club or whatever the other activities are, it can be difficult to fit in all of that and get enough practice riding. So that's something that also, when the trainer kind of goes to the parent and says, I really think that your son or daughter needs to be spending more days at the barn in order to be safe and be prepared for the next event, I think the parents need to listen to that. And it is a struggle because, of course, the parents are thinking, yeah, but I also want my kid to get into college. So we can't put all of our eggs just in this horse basket. And I think it is tricky. But I guess to boil it down, I would say the quality instruction and making sure that riders are committed enough and spending enough time in the barn and in the tack are probably those would be the top two things on my list.
Yeah. Personally, I think that my mom will really appreciate your answer, because that, I really couldn't agree more. And if there are any young rider parents listening, I definitely say listen to that, because I think that you've made some wonderful points. So, Bevin, it has been awesome talking to you about this topic. It's so important, and personally, I think I actually learned a ton, and I hope those of you listening at home did as well, because I'm definitely going to leave this recording with some new knowledge, and I'm very happy about that. So, Bevin, could you just give us any finishing thoughts and where listeners can find you on social media or a website you have or anything?
I would say the biggest thing to me when it comes to, all of this safety and the welfare of our horses, and really making sure that we all do our best by the sport. This is such an exceptionally wonderful sport that we all get to do. And it's important that we do right by it. By being responsible for ourselves and our horses, we're also being responsible for the whole sport. So just people being aware of the risks that they take and the decisions they make and how that affects eventing in general, I think is super important. I am always happy to hear from people. It doesn't have to just be professionals. If people have concerns and things that they feel need to be addressed or questions they want answers to, I probably don't have the answer to the question, but I can go and try to find an answer. So I'm always happy to do that. People can, on Facebook, I'm there, Bevin O'Reilly Dugan, or my business page on Facebook is O'Reilly Equestrian. And on Instagram, I'm on Instagram as well. I think I'm at O'Reilly EQ. And I have a website that's o'ReillyEQ.com. So those are all ways that people can contact me if you have, again, questions, comments, anything like that. I don't know when this podcast will come out. I'm going to the annual meeting in St. Louis, which is a little over a week away from when we're recording this. So again, if there are things people would like to try to find answers to, I'll be around all the people who might have the answers. And so I'm very happy to kind of just be the messenger. And really, I think that's the biggest part of what my role is in Area 1 is to kind of, shake the hornet's nest and see what happens and see what kinds of questions come out of it. And then I just try to go and get answers. I certainly don't have all of them myself.
Yeah, well, thank you so much again for this conversation. I think that this has been an amazing episode. So thank you again, and goodbye. Having an understanding of safety is just so important in eventing, so I hope you finish off this episode feeling a little bit more prepared for our show season here in Area 1 in the summer. So I'll finish us off the way every cross-country course starts. Have a great ride.